Dago Wab, Guinea, garlic bread, pizza slinging, spaghetti bending, Victimone, Perry Como, Luciano Pavarotti, solo meal, non-singer motherfucker.
You gold teeth, gold chain wearing, fried chicken and biscuit eating, monkey ate baboon, big thigh, fast running, high jumping, spear chucking, 360-degree basketball dunking, titsoon, spade, mulling yarn.
You little slanty-eyed, me-no-speaky American, own every fruit and vegetable stand in New York, bullshit Reverend Sun Young Moon, Summer Olympic 88 Korean kickboxing Sabaran bitch.
You Goya bean eating, 15 in a car, 30 in an apartment, pointy shoes, red wearing, menudo, meter, Puerto Rican cocksucker.
Chocolate, egg cream drinking, bagel and deluxe, banana for this Jew, asshole.
The WASPs run the country, and all of us should band together and overthrow them. You know what I'm talking about. They're all Protestants. They've all been Protestants, you know that. Come on, band together, people. Let's overthrow the country.
Let's stick together. The Catholics and the fucking Jews. We go back a few years together.
Come on.
Hey,
we're real. We're real. We get down and get dirty.
We were burning each other when Martin Luther was only a gleam in his mother's eye. Goddamn Protestants. Biggest thing that happens for them on Sunday is a bake sale.
No, they got to decide what color yellow tie to fucking buy.
That's right.
Gee, what should it be, lime green or dark green today, honey?
Right, the only fucking religion that has the Reader's Digest is a prayer book.
They don't get enough shit, and they have all the money. They have all the money. All those guys they're all running Northern Trust. They have all the banks on LaSalle Street. It's all horseshit.
The only time Protestants get on their knees is to adjust the fucking TV set.
They have all the goddamn insurance companies. They have all the insurance companies. They run the government. They run everything. That's this week on Siskel and Ebert and the movies and the asshole. And that's Roger.
I've been listening and reading.
You been reading now?
I read. I've been reading about your leaders, Reverend Al, Mr. Dew, Sharp Tone, Jesse. Keep hope alive.
Don't talk about Jesse.
A scene from Do the Right Thing, the most exciting film of the year so far. And this special edition of Siskel and Ebert is devoted to the filmmaker who created Do the Right Thing, 32-year-old Spike Lee, a serious filmmaker in frivolous times, especially this summer. I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune.
And I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times. Lee's first feature-length film was She's Gotta Have It, which was a hit at the Directors' Fortnight of the 1986 Cannes Film Festival, and then went on to be a big success at the box office, kind of a surprise success. In the film, Spike himself played a key character, a fast-talking con artist named Mars Blackman. A lot of Americans got their first look at Spike Lee when he played the same character in this TV commercial where he directed basketball star Michael Jordan.
This is something you can buy. And this is a patented, vicious, high-flying, 360 slam dunk. This is something you cannot do.
And that character there is a version of the characters that Spike plays in almost all of his movies, kind of the fast-talking sideman who comments on all of the action.
What I like about that commercial and all of his work is that he just seems a lot smarter. The film seems smarter.
Yeah.
This you can do, this you can buy, this you can't do. It just is, it's the way people talk. It's just smart. She's Gotta Have It was made independently for only $175,000, with Spike Lee as one of many suitors for the affections of a woman called Nola Darling. Everyone in this picture wants to sleep with her, including the irrepressible little Mars.
You know, we could put a divider right here. We'll have a roommate, and me, but never know I'm here.
You're right, I'll never know. How come every time I let a guy up here, the first thing they want to do is move in?
Well, you work, you got a nice crib, and you're fine.
One of the goals of the film is to open our eyes to the way young men treat women, with 3 of Nola's suitors viewing her as a prize to be won.
Honey, this food is absolutely delicious.
Don't listen to him. It's better than delicious.
Honey, for dessert, try some of my homemade sweet potato pie. You'll love it.
Also, I brought bottles of Martinelli sparkling cider.
Wait. I didn't know I was supposed to bring something.
Nola, why didn't you tell me?
You didn't have to bring anything.
It's okay?
I'm sure this film means different things to different people. For me, it's really an essay in praise of women, and that's so rare in films, black films in particular. Nola Darling stands for all women who are tired of being clawed at by men, who want just a little honesty, who are tired of sexual games. She's Gotta Have It is good fun with a sexual political agenda, good times and ideas being the hallmarks of Spike Lee's work.
What he does in this film, and you see him doing it all through his films, is to take a situation everybody is familiar with and stand it on its head. Everybody is familiar in both films about blacks and films about whites with the male stud, the guy who wants to have a one-night stand and move on. He's got a dozen girls on a string and so forth. This movie is the opposite. Nola Darling wants to be the independent person. She wants to take lovers and reject them according to her own rhythms or according to her own needs, and her lovers, the men in her life, are the ones who want to be constant. They're the ones who say, I want you to belong only to me, I want to be faithful to you, and they can't understand why she won't go along with that. So in a sense, the men are put in the position that women are so often put in films and in life.
It's one of the most interesting characters because she just stands there and you're waiting for her to be used in traditional film ways, and he doesn't bend her that way. I mean, she has a sexual component, which is true of the way women are typically portrayed, but she is the powerful figure, and she's most interesting.
You can see another thing in this film that you're going to see all through Lee's work, and that is the fact, first of all, there are no white characters in the movie. So nobody is playing toward the white characters, or there's no kind of the racism, either implied or subtle, that would be involved in black-white
you feel like
situation.
you're eavesdropping a little bit.
You're eavesdropping, and you get the entire spectrum of black class structure. The heroine is an artist for a Madison Avenue ad agency. The Spike Lee character is a delivery boy. Somebody else is a professor. Somebody else is kind of a street smart type.
Right.
You have a school counselor in the film. You have all kinds of different people in this film, and we see a spectrum of the black community instead of just these small segments that we've often got, usually involving things like criminals, cops, and things like that.
After his successful low-budget hit She's Gotta Have It, Spike Lee easily could have gone on to direct some kind of mindless mainstream feature film, some action picture, a horror film. He could have chased money, in other words. Instead, he made
School Days, and it takes place on the campus of a mythical black university named Mission College, where the student body is divided into the serious political activists on the one side and the party-minded fraternity and sorority kids on the other. The movie was directed by Spike Lee, who also plays a freshman who will do almost anything to get into the fraternity of his choice. And there's a reminder in this scene of Lee's last film, She's Gotta Have It. It's a scene where the fraternity pledge tries to talk girls into going out with him.
We could have fun, big fun. Just give me one reason why not, just one.
First of all, I don't know you from Adam.
The movie deals in a comic but pointed way with a lot of questions in the black community, including the way the co-eds choose to wear their hair. This is one of the film's best scenes, a dance sequence, a sort of a battle between students with lighter and darker complexions.
Don't you wish you had hair like this? Then the boys give you a kiss. Talk about nothing but bliss. Then you're gonna see what you missed.
There are some other serious moments, too, as a student explains why he won't join in a demonstration and risk getting thrown out of school.
I'll be the first one in my family to go to college. I mean, Dad, man, do you realize what that means? I mean, the first one ever?
There's no doubt in my mind, but that School Days, in its own way, is one of the most honest and revealing movies I've ever seen about modern black life in America. It deals with complicated questions in a complicated way, dramatizing the different paths in life that blacks in America can choose, not only for their careers, but especially in the way they view themselves. And there is hardly a white person in this film. These are blacks talking to each other, relating to each other in a way that most movies don't show because they feel, I guess, that they have to be commercial and bring in some other kind of character in order to appeal to a wider audience or something. I don't know, but this is a serious film, yet at the same time it's a goofy film too, and a heavyweight scene is likely to be followed by a song and dance number, right out of thin air. There are also a lot of loose ends. For example, the way the movie starts with a controversy over the school's investments in South Africa, and it ends without ever getting back to that issue or resolving it. School Days has the feelings of a wildly ambitious movie in which Spike Lee wanted to say a whole lot of things, and he got a lot of them said. It's disorganized, it's inconsistent, but somehow it's right on target and it's never boring.
I agree with you. There are some little flaws, but boy, you know, I wrote an article, it must have been now 4 or 5 years ago, about the absence of black women in the movies, young black women in the movies. They're not there. Even when we had films about teenagers being slaughtered, none of them were black. I mean, they're totally, probably the single most discriminated group at all, young black women. When I saw the camera pass along these sorority girls, the gamma rays they're called, and they meow, they do their own little bit and all that, I was thunderstruck at here is an image that has been absent from the movies, and he gets into the issues with black women and black men of intelligence and bright talk and bright conversation. It's just a bright film.
I felt over and over again in this movie that what Spike Lee was trying to do was make a movie that wasn't for everybody, that it was really for black people, and I enjoyed it too. I think a lot of other people would, but it wasn't a movie that tried to translate everything into acceptable terms and try to paper everything over. These were people talking to each other about what's on their mind.
And the way that he has overlapping dialogue, a bright conversation, so it sounds natural with actors who I've never heard of, and ensemble acting, a fabulous job of directing and writing.
The film is set on a black college campus, a place you wouldn't think existed if you looked at other movies. The students here are divided by their skin color and by the way they wear their hair.
You got standing all over your head when you got sandy spur.
It was surprising to see and hear racism within the black community being discussed. Another issue in the film, one of the lead characters wants the black college to get rid of its investments in racist South Africa. Other students have different priorities.
Apartheid is slavery. You can do what you want to do, Dad. I ain't throwing it away for nobody.
Spike Lee also appears in School Days, playing a would-be fraternity member named Half Pint who must get a girl before he can join his fraternity. School Days reveals a black world that simply hasn't been covered by other films. Black students discussing black issues. This is the world Spike Lee knows so well. He's a third-generation graduate of Morehouse College, and he opens our eyes in a most entertaining way to a world we should know exists. Obviously, there are black students going to college, but you wouldn't know it from looking at today's movies. He's made his people come alive.
That, to me, is the most amazing thing about all of these films, that for once you do not have the feeling that the black people in these movies are speaking to an invisible white audience and saying the things that audience either should hear or that they want them to hear. They're speaking to each other straight, they're shooting straight from the hip, they're saying exactly what they think without this implicit, almost racist censorship of trying to speak in terms of white expectations. You feel that black people are represented on the screen honestly and fully for almost the first time in commercial Hollywood history.
Well, the other thing that I particularly enjoy is that the movies, for all of the social import we're giving them, are a great deal of fun.
They're fun, yeah.
I mean, the musical sequences, I think, if I have one criticism of his work, I think that sometimes the musical sequence, particularly in School Days, go on a little long. As I was watching the films for a second time on a VCR, I'll be honest with you, I sped up some of the musical sequences. I don't know if you did, but you know what I mean? They went on a little bit long. I think they were a little indulgent. But they're there, and I'm seeing music. I'm seeing the guy use every resource of filmmaking that at anyone's command. He's making musical production numbers. Who's doing that today? That's what's so exciting for me.
Another thing you got to say about Spike Lee is, and we haven't mentioned this yet on the show, although it's been obvious in a lot of the clips, he's a good actor. He's got, if he were not a director, if he were only a movie actor, I think he would be more of a star in that field than he is now. I think that we forget in all of these movies that Spike Lee always plays a key role, and he's got that energy, he's got the intelligence and the timing, that kind of sprung rhythm in his voice and the way he repeats things, says things twice in order to kind of make fun of himself.
I like the emphasis. I mean, I like the way he does it also in his editing. He'll repeat a sequence when he wants to emphasize it. I want to clear up maybe one lingering notion that some people have. They say, is this a charity case? Are we being nice to this guy because he is black, a minority member, and so he's only pretty good, but because he's black, we're going to make him real good? And my answer to that question is, I am drawn to this guy because he's a superb filmmaker. If these films had been directed by a Martian, I would be praising them. The films are rich and exciting.
That is, and you've put your finger on something that is very sensitive and very tricky, and that is that word black that comes before
anything.
The black director, the black actor, the black policeman. The thing about Lee's films is that because everybody in his movies is black, with the exception of this last film, you can take out the adjective. It's just these people. And in the same way, you can take out the adjective before Lee, too, as far as I'm concerned. When I saw Do the Right Thing for the first time, I was blown away. I mean, I can't remember a film that has had a greater emotional impact on me because it told me exactly the way things are in this country, and it's not good and it's not happy, but it's truthful and it's honest, and that's something that takes a great director to do, and that's what he did.
Well, the other thing is, I've seen this picture about 2 weeks ago. There hasn't been, I don't know if there has been a day when I haven't thought about its quality, and I am planning on seeing it again tonight.
I want to see it again, too. The name of the movie is Do the Right Thing, and when it had its premiere at the Cannes Film Festival in France, there was an immediate storm of reaction. Some people saying the film was a call to racial violence, others saying it was one of the most fair-minded and honest films ever made about race in America. I was a member of the second group. I think this is a great film. The movie takes place in a Brooklyn neighborhood around a pizzeria owned by an Italian-American named Sal, who stayed behind when the neighborhood turned black. One of his customers wants to know about all the white faces on the restaurant's Wall of Fame.
Yo, Mook!
A couple words of time.
Okay.
Mookie!
So you know I'm still...
What? How come you got no brothers up on the wall?
Man, ask Sal, right?
Hey, Sal, how come you got no brothers up on the wall here?
You want brothers on the wall? Get your own place. You can do what you want to do.
That's Danny Aiello as the pizzeria owner. Two of his sons work in the restaurant with him, and in this scene, one of them, played by John Turturro, is confronted by the pizzeria's delivery man, who is played by Spike Lee himself.
Pino, who's your favorite basketball player?
Magic Johnson.
Who's your favorite movie star?
Eddie Murphy.
Who's your favorite rock star? Prince. You're a Prince fan.
Boss, Bruce.
Prince.
Bruce.
Pino, all you ever talk about is nigga this and nigga that. And all your favorite people are so-called niggas.
Sal thinks he understands his regular customers pretty well, even a local character named Radio Raheem, who is named after his giant boombox.
No service till you turn that off! 2 slices. Turn it up!
For 20 years, Sal has made his living in the neighborhood. Now one of his sons thinks it's time to pack up and move out.
I'm sick of niggas. It's like I come to work. It's Planet of the Apes. I don't like being around them. The animals.
And the frankness of that dialogue there is typical of the entire movie. Do the Right Thing starts out as a slice of life, a day in the life of this Brooklyn neighborhood, but by the end of the film, one of the characters will be dead and a riot will have taken place. One of the shocking things about the film is how much the violence at the end really surprises us, and yet when we look back over the film, how clearly we could see it coming. Do the Right Thing does not have good guys and bad guys, and in fact, one of the film's biggest surprises comes when one of the characters that we really like commits a violent act. What Spike Lee is doing here is throwing out all of the cliches and all of the nice, soft, soothing reassurances that we like to give ourselves about life in America, and showing, step by step, how everyday events can lead up to a racial incident, an incident that grows out of a long history of racism in America.
Now, among the many things I like about Spike Lee's work, and Do the Right Thing in particular, is the way he fills the screen with memorable characters who have great depth despite relatively small amounts of screen time. For example, we get to meet Mookie's sister, Jade, and a political activist named Buggin' Out. He's the one that wants to put some of those pictures of blacks on Sal's Wall of Fame.
Look, you don't know this, but I'm organizing a boycott of Sal's famous.
Why? What'd he do?
You know them pictures he got hanging up on the Wall of Fame?
So?
Another impressive quality of this film and Spike Lee's work in general, his strong use of music to set the mood. For example, this encounter between the two oldest members of the cast, Ozzie Davis and Ruby Dee. The music recalls the films of the 50s, the era in which these people came alive.
I thought you might like these. I guess not.
It's as if the characters in a Spike Lee movie each has his own theme music. The use of music is really a throwback to classic filmmaking with wall-to-wall sound that is deeply evocative of the emotional point of every scene. I haven't tried it, but I think you could listen to the musical score of a Spike Lee movie, and certainly this one, and very clearly recall the emotions of the film as they were taking place. Spike Lee's main composer, by the way, is his father, jazz artist Bill Lee.
You know, your mention of the music in this film makes me think back over all of his films, and we're going to get back to all of his films later on in the show, and realize that what he's trying to do in each film is to give himself a certain amount of freedom. His movies are serious, yet at the same time they have scenes that are obviously intended just primarily to be funny. There are almost always, in every one of his films, one or more musical sequences that break out of the reality level so that the people are acting as if they're in a musical comedy, and then they go back to reality again. And there's always eroticism. There is always a scene or more than one scene in which the people make love to each other, not in a sexy way or not for a sexy purpose, but to show that stage or that side of their relationship, so that these people are seen not just, you know, in lockstep with this is a serious movie and we're going to develop one serious point after another, but also in terms of their sexuality, in terms of their of the music in their lives, in terms of the funny things in their lives.
Well, what you're describing is a whole tapestry of filmmaking, because this guy, to me at least, has all the ammunition of a great filmmaker and shows it. We are living in very simple filmmaking times. Not this guy. Every element. I have small characters, little tiny characters, full rich. We know everything about them, it seems, just when they pop on the screen. You've talked about all the sexual side, political side. Everything seems to be there, and it's exciting to see.
Well, when I saw Do the Right Thing, which is about a neighborhood in Bedford-Stuyvesant, I was reminded of another great film early in a career, and that was Mean Streets by Martin Scorsese, which was about Italian-Americans on the Lower East Side of New York.
Right.
Both films seem to have the same kind of energy about the neighborhoods that these people are familiar with.
Finally, my #1 selection of 1989, and this was a quite easy choice. It's Spike Lee's magnificent racial drama, Do the Right Thing. Writer-director Spike Lee displaying a beautiful, rich, lyrical filmmaking style in his depiction of a racial explosion at an Italian pizzeria in a black neighborhood in New York City. Now, I've seen Do the Right Thing 4 times already, and each time I have tried to communicate to friends what is so special about this picture. First, when you watch it, you just know in your heart that this film is very wise about racial hatred in this country, and not just black-white. Unlike so many films, this picture has a real strong handle on a truth that is desperately important to all of us. Also, this movie is a great piece of filmmaking. Images and music and performances, the way the camera tracks up and down this one block on this brutally hot day, and images of ice cubes being rubbed on people and pizza and pictures on the wall. It has such a fresh way of structuring a narrative, and it's one of those rare films that forces you to talk about it long after you've left the theater. It's not, and this is something I try to communicate to friends of mine who have not seen this picture. It's not, as you might expect, full of doctrinaire black hatred against whites. Rather, Do the Right Thing is a beautiful, wailing cry to fight the racial hatred that separates one of us from all the rest of us.
To me, one of the most telling evidences of the underlying racism in this country is the number of white people I've talked to who saw this film and who thought that it was anti-white. This movie is not anti-white, it is not anti-black. I believe that anyone of any race with an open mind would come out of Do the Right Thing knowing more and empathizing more with the position of the other race than they had when they came in. This is a movie of unity. This is a movie of communication. It's a movie in which Spike Lee is trying to say, I've opened my eyes, I've tried to look at what's happening here, and here's what I saw. That's what the movie is about.
Well, I mean, you could also argue that this film is anti the behavior of the black and white and Oriental people in this film. No one does the right thing. They're all making mistakes that lead to an explosion at the end.
That is the key thing. And a lot of people, incidentally, I might add as a footnote, this is also my pick as the #1.
I knew it would be.
#1 film of the year.
Had to be.
Another thing that happens in the film is people do things you don't want them to do. There's one very attractive character, Mookie, played by Spike Lee. He's the one who throws the garbage can through the window that starts the trouble. People say, why did Mookie do it? Because they want that cliche. They want some angry radical or some criminal element to throw the garbage. Why did the nice kid throw the garbage can? And I think Spike Lee is saying, because sometimes things build up in that way. There's just so much pain here. There's so much tension here.
Yeah, and
that's why people, when you come out of the movie, you've got to talk about it. You've got to figure out for yourself what the right thing is.
Yeah. Now, the other thing is that when we've talked about this, again, I can hear people tuning out that saying, I don't want, all right, I know you're supposed to be nice to your brother and your neighbor and all that stuff. I don't want to be lectured to. Again, I repeat, this is a joyful film. It's very funny.
It's not a lecture.
It is very funny. It's beautiful, natural filmmaking.
And it's #1 on both of our lists. And my #4 title is Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing. This is a story of a long, hot day in a New York ghetto, and of some of the people who live there, and in a way so gradual that we hardly know what's coming, it shows how tension and misunderstanding can build up to violence between blacks and whites. 3 of the key characters in the film are an Italian pizzeria owner, played by Danny Aiello, his delivery man, played by the director himself, Spike Lee, and a neighborhood activist, played by Giancarlo Esposito.
Brothers on the wall here. You want brothers on the wall? Get your own place. You can do what you want to do.
Do the Right Thing was not a parable or a pep talk, but an attempt to show how little feelings can grow up into big ones and how a race riot can seemingly come out of nowhere. It was a strong, courageous film, one of the few American films in recent years that uncompromisingly tried to say something serious about race relations in our country.
It's an absolutely wonderful film. It's the best film of 1989, clearly, and it makes my list too. I put it in the number 6 slot, and I think as time goes on, maybe I might even rank it higher. I've seen it 4 times. I get great joy out of the filmmaking, in addition to the subject matter, which you talked about quite well. The filmmaking is so much fun that people who didn't go to this picture because they thought it might be too painful for them to watch or some kind of preachy lecture, boy, did they miss an entertaining motion picture. It's one of the best musicals, with dancing only in the very beginning of its title sequence, but it's musical. Everybody has their own theme song. This guy can make movies. The 1990s are going to be better because this guy's making films.
It was a revelation to me, too, to realize that Spike Lee, whose earlier movies I had enjoyed and admired, is really developing into an important
This is first class.
Our next movie is named Mo Better Blues, and this is the first Spike Lee film since Do the Right Thing, which we both thought was one of the best films of the last 10 years. So any film that Spike Lee made next was probably going to suffer by comparison. It's the second novel syndrome, even though this is actually his 4th film. But Lee has made a wise decision and made a completely different kind of film this time, a downbeat love story with a lot of music in it, starring Denzel Washington as a jazz man who betrays both of the women in his life, but is stubbornly loyal to the one guy he shouldn't trust, his manager, played by Spike Lee.
So how much you owe?
Afraid to say.
This is screen newcomer Cinda Williams making a sensational debut as a songstress and seductress.
We don't make love because you don't love me.
Director Lee's sister, Joa Lee, plays the other woman, a woman who would be good for Washington if only he could see that.
So how you doing, baby? We should have been down the club. We was kicking butt. I mean, you should have been there.
Good, I'm glad it went well.
Mo Better Blues begins with the hero as a young boy being forced to take music lessons, and it ends with the hero's son in the same house also taking music lessons. I thought those scenes belonged in another movie, especially since the movie hurries past the details about how Washington's character gets from a low point in his life into the world of that happy ending. There seems to be an act missing somehow. I was also disappointed, I guess, that this was not another great masterpiece like Do the Right Thing. It's more of a love story and more of a film about music instead of a fearless look at the way we live now. But you can't criticize a film for what it isn't. You especially can't criticize it for not being as good as Do the Right Thing. How many movies are? What this movie is a good-looking and well-acted film with a lot of great music and strong performances by Denzel Washington, the newcomer Cinda Williams, and Spike and Joa Lee. What it is not is a film with a clear sense of mission and a compelling storyline to take us from the beginning to the end. It's often a feast for the eyes and the ears, but it's not an example of Spike Lee's best work.
I had to see it a second time because I think I was, in the throes of the Do the Right Thing issue where, I'm hanging on every frame, and this picture doesn't have that kind of compelling quality, and that comes from the script. I think there's a lot of things going on here, maybe too many things. Maybe this needed another time through the typewriter. But the second time that I watched it, I guess I saw what was there of positive value, and there's a lot. The Denzel Washington character is an interesting character. He is playing a guy who is not particularly likable. You would think someone as glamorous as Denzel Washington, he's going to be really a really good guy. Well, he's pretty much a self-involved workaholic and very rough on the women in his life. And I admired that this time through. Also, you say a feast for the eyes, and it surely is that. This guy doesn't know how to make uninteresting shots. There was one problem that I had, which was that he has a music track all the way through this picture. He didn't do the right thing. There I thought it worked. Here I wanted some quiet for the intimate scenes between the characters, and that would be my one big complaint.
Well, one other problem that I had was some of the scenes are clearly improvised, and they aren't improvised very well. There are scenes where the actors are talking to each other, and it's like that feeling you get when you see improvisation on the stage, and each actor essentially is saying to the other actor, well, what do you want me to say? Although that's not the words they're using. But are you saying this, or are you saying that?
This is among the band members. There's a number of sequences like that.
Yeah, I think that the movie needed to be written from beginning to end. It shouldn't be left up in the air like that. Nevertheless, I'm disappointed in it because I think Spike Lee's work has been so high, but I would recommend it simply on the basis of the fact that it is worth going to see. There's a lot of good stuff.
I'll tell you, one payoff sequence for me was the Cinda Williams singing. I thought she was sort of a boring character, you know, the pretty girl, the too pretty girl, but empty-headed until she sings. That, and in fact, if I were remaking this movie, I'd have her sing earlier on so that we have something to really care for about her. She's very talented when she sings.
So you're recommending the film?
Yes.
You are.
Yes, with reservations, yeah.
That is the setup scene from Jungle Fever, as an African-American architect and an Italian-American office worker find themselves in lust with each other. And the message by Spike Lee, who made this film, is that both blacks and whites in America have been bombarded with sexual myths and stereotypes about each other to the degree that some interracial romances are inspired by what he calls jungle fever. His new film is brilliant in many ways, but his analysis of this love affair is not one of them. The actual relationship between Wesley Snipes and Annabella Sciorra, who play the couple, is seen only murkily. What Lee does see with great clarity is the way the affair is received in each character's home environment.
I'm seeing somebody.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You too, Simon?
Who are you seeing?
Oh.
Somebody from work.
Who is he? Like blonde, blue-eyed surfer type?
Hey, dude.
Right? What is that?
He's black.
If your father ever found out, I don't know.
Yeah, well, he's not gonna.
No, of course not. Hey, look, this is the 90s. There's nothing wrong with it, you know? You having a good time?
Well, I guess I just wasn't light enough for you, was I, Flipper? You had to eventually go get yourself a white girl, didn't you?
Snipes is married, and his wife, played by Lynette McKee, lacerates him with the outspoken frankness that's typical of a Spike Lee film.
I've told you what happened to me when I was growing up. I've explained to you. I poured my heart out. I told you how they called me high yellow, yellow bitch, white honky, honky white, white nigga, nigga white, octoroon, quadroon, half-breed, mongrel. And what do? Do you love this girl?
Oh, Drew, you gotta be kidding me. Plain talk about race with an honesty unusual in most films is Lee's strong point, and the best scene in Jungle Fever shows Snipes' wife talking about black men with her girlfriends.
It ain't no good black men out there.
Yes, they are, Nilda.
Most of them were drug addicts, in jail, homos. The good ones know they just so they got 10 women at a time, leaving babies all over the place.
We're looking in the wrong places.
Jungle Fever is a film with scenes of uncommon power, others of brilliance, and some scenes that just don't work. Lee, as always, shows the ability to deal even-handedly with his characters of various races, and indeed, one of the most positive characters in this film is a white, played by John Turturro, as a luncheonette operator. Scene after scene in this movie sees the truth beneath the myths and stereotypes and speaks it plainly. My only disappointment is that Lee seems to see the interracial romance itself mostly from the outside. He doesn't paint those two characters, so we feel that we really know and understand how they feel about one another. That's murky, but the movie as a whole, taken as a whole, is one of the great movies in a long time.
Well, I have a similar reaction to it, which is I thought that the two characters actually liked each other for, I thought, very specific reasons. I thought that the architect was frankly just tired. Tired, certainly at work. We've seen that. He's had a tough time being the one black executive in this architectural firm. He's fed up. Life at home, well, everybody's life at home is rough. So he's down. So he's susceptible to trying to just get some momentary surcease from all the pain. She, I think, likes the guy.
Yeah.
He's a nice guy. So why shouldn't? So that part, I think, isn't what he's been selling as a sort of salacious.
Spike has been going around giving interviews about how these people are attracted to each other because of black-white stereotypes, and it's not there in the movie.
I don't think it's on the screen. However, it is all, as you said, it is all of the other stories. And I want to talk about this John Turturro character. Now, he played the racist son in Do the Right Thing. Here it's just the flip side. He's the Italian-American who embraces other people. In fact, he has sort of a crush on a young black executive woman who shops at his candy store. And there's a shot. It was the same thing was true in Do the Right Thing, where he just takes a camera shot outside a window looking at this guy who's all alone. All of his friends are racists. And it's just so right. He's so knowledgeable about another group of people other than blacks.
That is a great moment. And throughout the movie, what he does in showing the neighborhoods, the communities that these two characters come from is very good. For example, the character played by Samuel Jackson, Wesley Snipes' brother, who is a crack addict. Totally destructive and totally destroyed, and the way that he creates havoc within his family is, you know, Spike has been criticized earlier for not dealing with the drug issue in some of his movies. In this movie, he deals with it all right.
Summer is full of fluffy pictures. Here's one of substance.
Spike Lee has been in the news lately in what I think is a sadly familiar way, complaining bitterly about losing the top prize at the Cannes Film Festival, almost as if the festival jury owed him a prize.
Look, people are free to do the hell whatever they wanted to do. What free? What the hell are you talking about, free?
It's 1989, and Spike Lee takes Do the Right Thing to the Cannes Film Festival, where the movie considered the best film of the year by some critics doesn't even get a single award.
Hey!
2 years later, Lee brings his newest movie, Jungle Fever, to Cannes, where once again he fails to win one of the big prizes. But a new category is created at the festival so that one actor from the movie, Samuel L. Jackson, is honored for his supporting performance. Spike Lee came home, upset again from Cannes, and recently he talked to me about his obsession with winning the big awards at Europe's most important film festival. Do you do yourself a disservice complaining about losing at Cannes?
I don't really see it as complaining. I was just talking, to me, it was very matter of fact there. But let's be honest, this has happened to me twice, in '89 with Do the Right Thing, and now '91 with Jungle Fever. And so I see nothing wrong with expressing my views on how we think that we've been robbed both times, and we're not the only people that feel that way.
Now let's talk about the effect that this may have, the protest first, on white audiences interested in your film. Are you worried that they'll look at you, even in just the interview we're doing now, and say, he's a complainer, he thinks he's owed something, and I pigeonhole him, angry young black man, forget it.
Well, they do that anyway, so that Cannes thing has really nothing to do with that. I do not base my decisions worrying about what white people are going to think. That's not my mona opera. I'm sorry. There are some black people that make decisions that don't worry about, what will white America think about this? How will this hurt me? It doesn't come into my way of thinking.
Now, one part of white America that you do think about is the people that control the budgets for your movies.
Exactly.
In other words,
that's something different.
That's money.
That's money.
Talk about, then, the real reason that you protest, because I can't believe the real reason is that you want Whoopi Goldberg's approval.
Alan Parker.
Vangelis, the composer.
The real reason is that all these awards, the Golden Palm in Cannes, the Academy Awards, there's money behind those awards. There's power behind these awards. More and more, when I find myself in negotiation with studios, the thing they always like to throw up in front of my face is, Spike, well, you do all right domestically, but according to our ledger right here, according to the numbers, you're not doing as well as you hope to overseas.
So deep down, what you're doing when you protest on the steps of the Grand Palais or wherever they catch you, what you're really doing is trying to help the budget on your next film.
And the budget, and also how just make sure that this stuff is not going unnoticed. I mean, I don't know who they think I am. I'm not just gonna sit around, scratch my head, and show my teeth while we get jerked around 2 years by the jury. So I'm gonna talk about it. And if doing that, we've lost some viewers who think that Spike Lee is a crybaby or a sore loser, then we just lost him.
He doesn't back down. I guess I wish that Spike Lee spent more time talking about his movies, films full of love and humor and also sadness.
Well, being a good loser is an American tradition, and maybe Spike has just gotten the European disease, because a couple of years ago a French director gave the audience an obscene sign from the stage, and this year Spike wasn't even the angriest director. One of the Polish directors called Roman Polanski, who was the head of the jury, a shrimp, and then gave him his award back because he didn't get the one he wanted. So Spike's right in the great Cannes tradition, I think.
Yeah, but the problem is that a lot of the press back here focuses on him more than these other people.
Our first movie is Malcolm X, and it can only be described as a triumph for director Spike Lee, who has been talking about this movie for so long that anything less than a masterpiece would have been an anticlimax. But Lee has made a great film, one of the most absorbing, entertaining, and challenging biographies I've seen. He tells the story of a man born in Nebraska as Malcolm Little, whose father is murdered by the Klan and who as a young man comes east to Harlem, where he is blinded by the superficial glamour of a life of wine, women, gambling, and crime. During the movie, we will see Malcolm undergo more than one transition on his odyssey from a two-bit numbers runner to a leader and spokesman for his race. The change begins in prison, where he falls under the spell of a follower of the black Muslim movement of Elijah Muhammad.
Why don't you want to look like what you are? What makes you ashamed of being black?
I can tell you something, I'm not ashamed of being anything.
Albert Hall plays the man who opens Malcolm's eyes there. When he was running numbers, Malcolm's best buddy was a guy named Shorty, played here by Spike Lee. Now, starting out as a black Muslim preacher, Malcolm meets Shorty again.
I gotta hand it to you, Red. That's the best preacher Hyper ever did here.
No hype, brother. It's the truth.
And before long, he meets the woman destined to be his wife. She's played by Angela Bassett as a serious and sensitive woman who sees the man behind what is already developing as the legend.
What have you set your mind to?
Being a good Muslim, a good nurse, and a good wife.
One of Malcolm X's gifts was her brilliant oratory, and Denzel Washington convinces us that this man could sway crowds with his voice and his reasoning.
Every time you break the seal on that liquor bottle, that's a government seal you're breaking. Oh, I say it again, you've been had. You've been took. You've been hoodwinked. Bamboozled.
I hope you can get a sense there of some of the power of Malcolm X, which is one of the great film biographies like Lawrence of Arabia or Gandhi. It shows the whole span of a man's life, but it does something more. It's an entertaining, thoughtful movie about a man whose life has changed its image in the quarter of a century since he was shot down. Malcolm's death was not widely mourned at the time by most blacks or whites because he was considered a preacher of racial division. And the film makes two things clear. One, that he moved in his lifetime from a rigid philosophy of racial separation to a belief that races could work and live together. And two, that he saw more clearly and was more of a realist than some of his more optimistic contemporaries.
I think it's a great film, too, and I like your comparison to Gandhi and Lawrence of Arabia because there's a great shot in this picture late in the film, and we've seen the whole life in America, where he does go off to Mecca, where he does get his conversion to embrace all people of peace, no matter what their color is.
Yes.
And we see him come over the sands and look at the great pyramids in Egypt. And I thought, what a fabulous film to take us from the streets of New York to the pyramids of Egypt. Spike Lee was arguing that he had to shoot on location and do those kinds of things.
And he was,
and he's right. He's right, and it's very exciting to see a whole life that spans literally the globe. And it's a terrific film. And there's another good thing in the picture, too, that you didn't mention, and that is the romance in the film. Quite by surprise, Spike Lee is not known for having great romances in his pictures. His pictures are more about men.
Yeah.
And the relationship between Malcolm and his wife, Betty, is a beautiful story within this thing, and it comes as quite as a surprise. So this is not your hate-whitey picture.
This is a portrait of an entire life, of a man who starts who has a start which is really almost a finish, because after his father is killed, the state takes the children away from the mother. He is raised in an orphanage. He comes to New York as a street kid, and then in prison he gets this conversion, the first of several, and then in Mecca he gets another conversion, and by the end of the film he's a man whose loss really should be mourned.
There's one other thing. I want to focus on the performances in Malcolm X, which may be overlooked because I suspect this film is going to be analyzed politically first and foremost. Denzel Washington does so many things well in the film, including changing the way Malcolm speaks depending on whether he's addressing a white or a black audience. Here he is at Harvard University, where he spoke quite often, talking to a mostly white crowd.
Father only means that you're taking care of your children. That's what it is to be a father. Father doesn't mean that you're having some babies. Anybody can have a baby.
And here he is in a Nation of Islam lecture in Harlem. Same man, different voice.
We didn't come over on the Nita, the Pinta, and the whatchamacallit. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us.
And the other special performance in the film is by Al Freeman Jr. as Elijah Muhammad, the controversial leader of the Nation of Islam. Freeman's interpretation is so uncanny that when he first appears on the screen, I know of more than one person who was very familiar with what the real Elijah Muhammad looked like, who wondered if they were watching documentary footage of him somehow taken in color.
That devil be watching you every step, and your own brothers will be jealous, hostile, Go slowly.
Yes, sir. That's just remarkable. I think both Denzel Washington and Al Freeman Jr. are worthy of Oscar nominations in respectively the lead and supporting acting categories. And I'm telling you that Al Freeman Jr. is going to be ignored. I just know it because it's so dead on. People are going to say, is that an actor? We know Elijah Muhammad's dead, but it doesn't compute when you watch it.
And it's very, very subtle the way that character is drawn and played by Al Freeman in order to be a man who has both good and flawed parts to his personality.
And on that score, Spike Lee, and he's done this in other films, and I don't think he gets enough credit for this, he is self-critical. He's critical of the African Americans in his movie. This is not a guy who is a hate-whitey, pro-black guy in his films.
That, to me, was one of the more... I don't know exactly what I expected from Malcolm X, but I thought that, in a way, as a white person, I would be made more uncomfortable by the film.
Yeah.
What Spike Lee was able to do in this film, as far as I was concerned, was to draw me into the experience of this man's life so that I could understand where he was coming from, what he was reacting to, how he felt, and how he changed. And this is a movie that I think is for all people. It's not just, even though the subject might seem to be exclusionary, this movie is inclusionary for all American audiences, for all world audiences. Number one on my list is Spike Lee's Malcolm X, a great screen biography and an important film. Denzel Washington starred in a performance that deserves an Oscar nomination, showing the black Muslim leader over a period of more than 20 years as he develops from a Harlem street criminal to a fiery and intelligent orator whose words may not have been welcome in most quarters, but could not be ignored. Malcolm X is a well-crafted film, well-written and directed and acted, but it's drawn a lot of criticism that I think is unjustified. Spike Lee has an abrasive public personality, and sometimes critics attack him through his films. Malcolm X deserves to be seen for what it is, the portrait of a man who spoke some very hard truths, who said things that it was not politic for more mainstream figures to say out loud, whether they were black or white. In a year like most years, when most movies wanted simply to entertain, Malcolm X, whether we argued with it or not, was a movie that challenged us to think about things that are important in our society.
I haven't heard people who've actually seen the picture complain.
Oh, I've gotten a lot of letters from people who differ with his philosophy, or who say that the movie didn't point out various unsavory things about some of the things he said and thought.
I think it points out the unsavory things. There was a hate-whitey element to what he said, and it's right there on the screen. I think the film is also critical of Elijah Muhammad, very directly and boldly. Spike Lee makes self-critical films about black Americans, and I think this has those elements in it. My only problem was I thought the dance sequence in the beginning of the film was a little too long. I would have ended it a little bit differently than he. I think it's a tremendous film. It is on my 10 best list. I like the arc of the film. I like that it's from the streets in New York all the way to Egypt, the pyramids, and Mecca. I think it's
we've had a lot of screen biographies about safe people. Lawrence of Arabia, Gandhi. Those were good movies, but they were safe movies. To make a movie like this about Malcolm X took some courage.
I think that he did a great job. I think that's the most important thing.
Our first film is Spike Lee's Crooklyn, and this is obviously a film close to Lee's heart. He says it's not autobiography, but it's inspired by the years when he was growing up in Brooklyn, and it recalls a world before crack, before guns, and a family and a neighborhood that both worked. Co-written by Lee with his sister Joie Susanna Lee and his brother Sankey Lee, it's set in the early 1970s when four brothers and a sister in the Carmichael family share a noisy household here with the Partridge family.
Went to sleep with you all my life. Is the TV on? No!
The story is told mostly through the eyes of the only girl in the family named Troy and played by Zelda Harris. After her parents have a fight, she gives some unsolicited advice to her father, a musician played by Delroy Lindo.
Troy, your father's sorry about last night.
It's not your fault, Daddy.
You know, Daddy doesn't want to fight or yell or scream or holler. All Daddy wants to do is play his music.
The mother is played in a strong and effective performance by Alfre Woodard.
Come on, Mommy. Why I gotta eat this?
Black-eyed peas have calcium.
All the calcium in the world ain't gonna make up for this nasty taste.
It might have made up for your broke arm.
Crooklyn isn't a movie that's heavy on plot. It's heavier on memory, and it's a very personal film in which Lee and his brother and sister try to understand the daily pressures on the father, a gifted but financially unsuccessful musician, and the mother, a hard-working school teacher who never has quite enough money to make ends meet. The movie has some surprises in it, some of them sad ones, but it also has a very thoughtful message. Spike Lee seems to be asking why this safer and healthier world disappeared from America's inner cities and whether it could somehow be rebuilt.
I like the film, too. There's one big glaring error I think he makes in the picture. Let me get rid of that, and then I'm going to start complimenting the film again.
Okay.
And that's when she goes off for a trip to relatives in the South, and he compresses the images using an anamorphic lens and makes everything seem squeezed tight. And people are going to wonder whether the projectionist is out of sync or something. And it was a mistake because I think the material, the world there, would have been so different. We could all see it that he didn't need to do that gimmick.
Well, one thing that also caught my attention, one thing that Spike Lee has done in his films, almost alone among filmmakers, is to experiment with visual styles.
That's
For example, the people who are walking and they look like they're floating, or in this movie, the 360-degree shot.
There's lots of different shots.
And I think you have to give him credit, Gene, for trying to portray the fact that this world looks so alien to that young girl that it just doesn't look like the real world at all. I think audiences will get used to it. They'll accept it. They can learn from this show that there's nothing wrong with the projectionist.
The strengths of the picture far override any of the mistakes. The strengths are that I like that a more adventures movie makes is not tell a conventional story. I will say that after the first 20 minutes, people are going to be sitting there wondering when the story is the conventional story is going to kick in, and it doesn't. He's building a mosaic of this family, these characters, and we feel the pressures. Like in few family films, we really feel the pressures, particularly on the dad. He gives a real strong performance. It's a complicated portrayal of a father, realistic. We don't have any movies about young black women at all. We just don't get them at all. And here is one with this character. I enjoyed the picture a lot.
I did too. He didn't try to make it into an artificial story that ends, because after all, childhood is a beginning. And at the end of this film, you realize that they're on the launching pad now for whatever is going to happen later.
It's a good piece of work.
Okay.
In order to fight the powers that be, fight the power.
Teresa Randall plays an out-of-work actress who gets a job as a phone sex worker in Girls 6, Spike Lee's new film. And in the course of her experience, a strange thing happens to her. She gets involved in the online fantasies and begins to enjoy the phone sex as much as her clients do. While Girls 6 is still new on the job, she discusses possible phone sex fantasies at a training session. Naomi Campbell plays another trainee.
This is Mistress Marlene. I heard you've been a naughty boy. Now pull down your pants and bend over my knees. You're going to get spanked.
Playing roles on the phone creates opportunities for the movie to parody many different kinds of roles, and Teresa Randall is seen as if she were on The Jeffersons, and as Foxy Brown, a character made famous by Pam Grier.
Phone Sex Hall of Fame?
As she gets into her job, only her next-door neighbor voices objections. He's played by Spike Lee himself.
So what does this have to do with your acting career? What happened to that?
I'm still an actress.
How are you acting?
What?
How are you acting? You're not on stage, you're not in front of the camera, you're on the phone. How are you acting talking on the phone?
Girls 6 is an ambitious film, but I'm afraid it's not a very well thought out one. It wants to say a lot of things about acting and sex and fantasies and imagination, but what it doesn't provide is a convincing idea of what Girls 6 is really thinking and really feeling. Spike Lee is trying, I think, to show how Girls 6's role-playing is connected somehow to all the roles that all of us play, and I admire him for using pop culture icons and fantasy sequences in an effort to explore that material. But the movie is sort of disorganized, and it never really added up for me. You know, I felt Jennifer Jason Leigh's phone sex girl in Shortcuts, the Robert Altman film, had more just-in-her scenes than this film
This
had.
is Spike Lee's first bad film, as far as I'm concerned. I was very disappointed. It's, to say the least, sort of disorganized. I couldn't figure out what he was really saying. He throws in a real-life episode of some real human tragedy with a girl in the housing projects meeting tragedy.
Yeah, what was that about?
Well, you know what? I think he may be saying, hey, look, the world is distracted through this sexual preoccupation and all this phone talk, and here's something real going on in the world. But you know what? As I saw that, I was saying, you know, I'm more interested in this little girl story than I am in this phone sex stuff. Also, I think that the parodies and all that are fairly obvious and quite predictable and beneath him in a way. You know that an actress, we're way ahead of this picture because he shows us all of her frustrations for about 20 minutes, it seems like, before she takes the job. Now, come on, we already know what this movie is about.
We've already seen the scenes with a lecherous director and so forth.
That's bad
and another thing, this movie is allegedly told from the female point of view. I think it's really from a male point of view, and I'll tell you why. There's a scene in the movie where she goes to meet a client that she talked to on the phone, and she's going to go out with him on a date. I think that's what the clients would like the girls to do. I don't think that's very often what the girls do.
It's not good work.
Our next movie is a return to form for director Spike Lee, whose Girls 6 was a disappointment, but whose new film, Get on the Bus, is one of his very best, a portrait of a busload of some 20 African-American men on their way to the Million Man March in October 1995. The march drew many men for many different reasons, and the cross-section on the bus allows Lee to examine a lot of those reasons. For example, there's a father who has neglected his son who got in trouble. Now, under a court order, they're chained together. There's a light-skinned man on the bus, the child of an interracial marriage. He is a Los Angeles policeman who takes heat from a struggling actor who seems to think he's not black enough.
Okay, I consider myself black, just like Bob Marley was black, okay? He was a so-called mulatto. I consider myself black.
Well, no disrespect, partner, but I could consider myself 6'4" and ugly. The fact remains that I'm 6 foot and too cute for the English vocabulary. You know what I'm talking about.
Ossie Davis plays the oldest man on the bus, a student of African-American history who gives a young filmmaker some history lessons. A replacement driver on the bus, played by Richard Belzer, is Jewish, and he has fundamental problems with the frequently expressed anti-Semitism of Louis Farrakhan, the convener of the march.
He called Judaism a gutter religion. He said Hitler was a great man.
I wouldn't expect you to drive a bus to a Ku Klux Klan rally.
We're able to listen in as many different kinds of black voices are heard expressing many varieties of politics and experience. Yet at the same time, the film feels real. We're drawn into the rhythm of the cross-country journey and get to know the people and get involved in their personalities and their problems. By the end, it's not the march itself that matters so much as what all of those marchers find out about themselves. Thumbs up for me for Get on the Bus.
I liked it very much, too, and I think the interesting phrase that you use is listen in, because who wouldn't want to have been on a bus listening to what was talked about something very important in these men's lives? And that's the eavesdropping quality is the film at its finest. I have two criticisms. One, and this is one, I'm now joining many people who have criticized Spike Lee's films in the past. I thought it was always a strength to have music played all the way through. I think there's too much music in here. I think the stories are so interesting. I would have taken some of the music out. The other thing is, you seem to like the use of the Jewish character in the film. I had a different reaction. I think he's totally illogical. He comes on, he's the nicest guy, he has all the good spirits anyone could possibly have, and then somehow he's set up like a straw man to be knocked down because he suddenly finds out it's going to the Million Man March, and his only reason for leaving is Farrakhan's involved. It comes so late. It's totally illogical.
I feel that he was put into the movie in order to give an expression to criticisms of Farrakhan, which he does, and which the people on the bus are not much interested in because, frankly, the people on the bus aren't much interested in Farrakhan.
It doesn't make any logical sense, but that's a small point within an otherwise, I think, very fine film.
And now, once again, the revolving thumb goes around and around, and my thumb this week points down, way down, to the silly, misinformed, harmful people who are spreading untrue rumors about Spike Lee's wonderful new film, Get on the Bus. This is the kind of film we need more of, a drama following 20 black men on a cross-country trip to the Million Man March and taking a thoughtful look at their lives and opinions.
Keep your voice down. I forgot. You can't let your macho self out of the closet.
He said, you're not man enough to admit that you love me to him.
Get on the Bus deserves to be applauded, as Gene and I did on our show. But a column by Laura S. Washington in the Chicago Tribune reports that some African Americans are calling, amazingly, for a boycott of this movie. One protester doesn't like it because two of the characters are homosexual. I guess he doesn't see anything wrong with discrimination as long as it's against gays instead of blacks. It makes me really sad to think that when a thoughtful, powerful film about an important black subject gets made, there are people in the African American community eager to shoot it down or to shoot themselves in the foot. And of course, it goes without saying that none of the critics cited in the column had actually seen the film themselves. You don't need much information to be ignorant. The revolving thumb points down on the misguided, uninformed boycott of Get on the Bus.
It is absolutely ridiculous, and again, the key, of course, is that the people have not seen the picture.
Yes.
So often, when you have these boycotts of pictures, you can just count on the fact that no one has cared enough to take a look at the film.
It's very sad.
At that moment that that bomb went off, and those 4 little girls were blasted and buried in the debris of the church, America understood the real nature of the hate that was preventing integration.
Walter Cronkite talks about the significance of the 1963 bombing murder of 4 young girls in a Birmingham, Alabama church, Hate Revealed, and that's the significance, too, of Spike Lee's powerful new documentary, 4 Little Girls. And the intent of this film, I suppose, is similar to what Steven Spielberg is doing, getting on tapes interviews with Holocaust survivors across America, and that is making a permanent record of the inconceivable hate, holding it up to the light, facing it, preserving it so it can properly be scorned and never denied. Here, the parents of one of the girls who died in the bomb blast recall trying to explain a whites-only luncheonette to their then 6-year-old daughter.
Denise said she wanted a sandwich.
And it was kind of painful to say, no, you can't have it. She wanted to know why. And we had to tell her the sage-old story about whites only can eat here, but we can't. We'll eat when we get home.
And here a friend of the same dead girl recalls the funeral of the children.
I remember coming down the steps of Addie's and Denise's funeral and letting go of the casket. I don't know, I just lost something, you know.
Again, this racist attack had several important repercussions.
No, I said, look, I'm going to have to get out of the movement and kill these guys. We are not going to let guys come into the community, blow up our churches, and kill our children. We're not going to do it.
The second option was that if blacks in Alabama got the right to vote, they could protect their children.
The first time I met Spike Lee, at the time of Do the Right Thing, he told me he thought he was on a mission, that he had a calling. And I think this must be part of the calling, to use film to document the tragedy of the black experience in America. If you don't know this sad chapter, you will want to experience it and meet some remarkable people who survived it.
You know, I remember the day when those 4 little girls were murdered, and it was sort of like the day of the tragedy in Oklahoma City, when the life of the whole nation comes to a halt and you're confronted with something that really threatens the fabric of this deal that we've all made with each other to try to get along with each other in this country called America. And that was the day that was really the turning point in the civil rights movement, because it gave a face to the hatred that underpinned segregation. And for Spike Lee to bring it back now 34 years later is very important, because again today churches are being bombed in the South, and somehow the target of a church is very important, because a church is where people keep their spiritual goods and where they keep their values. And when you attack somebody's church, you're attacking their beliefs. It's worse than blowing up their house.
Well, I mean, of course. I mean, who could be more defensive? Now let's get back, though, to the filmmaking here. And the filmmaking, you talked about the sadness of the situation. His filmmaking is very good. To focus, again, on not specifically the crime itself and the prosecution thereof,
but the memories.
And the survivors.
Yes, yes.
And what they've had to carry with it. And to try to explain to your child how someone can hate you if they've never met you.
He Got Game is Spike Lee's strongest and most moving film since Malcolm X 6 years ago. And it grows out of his feelings about the incredible pressures that professional sports exert on star athletes right down to the high school level. The film opens with a glorious montage over music by Aaron Copland of basketball being played all over the country. And then we meet Denzel Washington, a prisoner whose son is the most sought-after high school player in the nation.
Governor's made a request that your son, Jesus Shuttlesworth, seriously consider enrolling in his alma mater, Big State. If you persuade your son to do this, the governor's given me his word. He'll do everything in his power to cut your time here short, considerably.
Governor can do that? I mean,
He can do that.
So the father will try to talk him into going to Big State University, but the son, named Jesus and played by Ray Allen of the Milwaukee Bucks, is also under pressure from his girlfriend. Played by Rosario Dawson, she also wants to influence what choice he makes.
DeAndre's an agent.
Lala, you know I ain't supposed to be talking to no agents. You know that it's illegal. You know that.
Look, all he wants to do is talk to you for 5 minutes to see where your head is at.
My head is on my shoulders. It's gonna stay there.
The son blames the father for his mother's death and for a lot of other things, including his name.
Why in the hell did you name me Jesus anyway? What type of name is that?
It's a biblical name.
No kidding.
It finally all comes down to one-on-one, father and son facing each other on the court.
I win, you sign. You win, you do what you want to do, tear it up, whatever. I go back to Attica because I know that's what you really want, right?
You want to play me one-on-one?
One-on-one.
And if I win, you get the hell out of here?
I ain't studied, son.
The hell out of my life?
Forever.
You rock.
He Got Game has a lot of expert inside knowledge about the way agents and the top colleges recruit star athletes. I'm sure Spike Lee has seen a lot of that at first hand. It's an angry and passionate film, but it also has a lot of heart in its theme about a father and son learning to love and accept one another. Ray Allen, who, as I mentioned, plays for the Milwaukee Bucks, is a gifted actor and needs to be, because this is one sports movie that doesn't have any big game scenes or sports showdowns. except for an all-important confrontation between father and son. Denzel Washington is fascinating in the way he uses silence with his son, not answering the anger and insults, but waiting and watching. This is really a good film.
I thought it was very good, too, and I was taken by the father and son relationship more than any of the basketball in the picture. And I know this is being talked about as, naturally, Spike Lee's basketball movie, but this is a wonderful father-son story. And I think you're quite right to credit Ray Allen for an excellent performance. I mean, who expected this? I certainly didn't. He's working with Denzel Washington, who's one of our most charismatic actors, and he's right there with him every step of the way.
It really is.
It's a good matched pair. The two of those guys just work beautifully together.
You know, another thing I liked about this film, and that Spike Lee does in a lot of his films, he comes up at the end, and I won't say what it is, he comes up at the end with a wonderful image. He's able to kind of encapsulate a whole movie and a whole feeling and a whole story in one image, and it comes out of nowhere and it surprises us, and at the end, as it delivers and we finally understand exactly what has happened, it really has an emotional impact.
Well, he's a gifted image maker. Okay.
Spike Lee's Summer of Sam was the most exciting film I saw at Cannes. It's not the story of the serial killer named Sam, so much as the story of how the killings affected New York City during a long, hot summer in 1977. One of the hottest touring shows in the country right now is the Kings of Comedy, 4 black stand-up comedians who are filling huge arenas with jokes that mix political and social commentary. Spike Lee's new film, the original Kings of Comedy, is a concert documentary shot before a live audience in Charlotte, North Carolina, and capturing the energy of 4 comics who are all basically working in the tradition of Richard Pryor. The MC and first comedian is the well-known TV personality Steve Harvey.
It's a damn shame the whole movie was the Titanic all that long. That movie had been about black people, wouldn't even been no movie. The band was playing as the ship went down. What black band you know gonna keep playing with the damn ship going down?
The youngest comedian, D.L. Hughley, has his own brand of African-American Bible study.
They didn't have to describe Jesus to me for me to know he was black. Jesus' first miracle was turning water into wine at a wedding. Now, if that ain't black folk, I don't know what is. Lord, we done ran out of wine. Well, y'all know normally I don't do this, but go ahead and keep the party going.
The older and mellower Cedric the Entertainer gets into politics.
You know, black people, we don't deal with debt like that. That'd be too much pressure for a black president. $6 trillion, man. He'll be sitting at the White House, man, talking about, hey, dog. Hey, man. Hey, tell him I ain't got it, man.
And Bernie Mac's edgy act is based on domestic situations.
You know, but see, women like to be your mama, your daddy, your uncle, your accountant, your pastor. They want to tell you what to do when they come, where you going. Who you talking to? Who over there? Sit down here. Don't park the car there. Slow down. Light red. Stop.
Watching this movie is like flashing back to the power and energy of Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy in their concert acts from the 70s and 80s. When comedy is based on current events, it has a way of cutting through the fog and offering hard-edged social commentary. We laugh because these comedians are funny, but also because a lot of the time they're perceptive and they're right. The original Kings of Comedy is an electrifying film showing that the heritage of Pryor and Murphy lives on.
Well, I don't think any of these guys are in the same league as Eddie Murphy or Richard Pryor, but I am giving thumbs up to this because I have to be honest, I laughed a lot. I got a lot more laughs than I've gotten out of a lot of the mainstream comedies. And you wouldn't think a director would mean that much to a comedy concert film, but Spike Lee does a great job of really zooming in on certain audience members who become part of the action. Yeah. And there are a few vignettes that go on off screen, you know, where the guys are at a radio station or they're messing around on a basketball court. That's kind of interesting as well.
Yeah, I also like the way that Harvey and some of the other people interact with the folks in the front row, insulting them or kidding along with them and so forth. And,
which is interesting stuff because they're at the end of a tour and yet they're still doing fresh stuff because it depends on who's in the crowd.
Obviously, they're ad-libbing as they go along. But, you know, another thing, you know, when you say they don't compare with Murphy and Pryor, well, in a way, they were the groundbreakers, especially Richard Pryor. But if you saw one of these guys in an entire concert of his own, he might really be able to develop more. I mean, here we're kind of getting the greatest hits from their acts, but even so, I think Bernie Mac, when he gets into his domestic stuff and the sister's kids that he's raising and so forth, that comes real close to the edge between humor and
all of these guys, I mean, this is not a film for kids. I mean, this is adult material. And I think it would be crazy if we didn't talk about the fact a lot of this is about race. Each one of those comics gets on and talks about the difference between blacks and whites reacting to different situations. Although it's not necessarily racist at all. I didn't see that in there.
No,
it's just pointing out differences that a lot of us are afraid to mention. These guys aren't afraid to talk about anything.
Observational, right?
Okay, my number 2 movie is Spike Lee's 25th Hour. And not just because Lee had the courage to place his characters in the world of post-9/11 New York, a place where taverns have shrines to fallen firefighters and yuppies live in high-rises that look down on Ground Zero. The central story concerns Edward Norton's last night of freedom before serving a 7-year jail term for dealing drugs. But the movie's really about friendship, trust, and family.
I'll be there, for Christ's sake. Helen, I'm bringing some friends. I'm bringing Naturel.
Monty, wait, Monty, please. Why you bring her?
Why wouldn't I?
You have this discussion once before, no? You get very mad at me.
Oh, you know what? You stop with that already. I already told you it wasn't her.
Norton is one of our best actors, and he's matched here by my favorite young actress, Rosario Dawson, not to mention the fine work from Philip Seymour Hoffman, Barry Pepper, and Brian Cox as Norton's father. Cox's closing speech about a possible fork in the road for his son is heartbreaking and unforgettable.
You know, this movie is such a beautiful elegy to this guy's life, which is now over. I mean, it's not just that he's going in for 7 years to prison, and that's going to be bad, but he has to say goodbye to everything. And as Barry Pepper points out in a wonderful speech, it will never be the same again after he gets out. What he has lost is basically everything. Now, of course, he deserved to lose it because he was a drug dealer, but nevertheless.
That's right. And this movie doesn't try to make you feel too sympathetic. It just says, here's who they are, here's the reality of their lives.
Spike Lee's new movie combines office politics, sexual politics, and politics. It's titled She Hate Me, and it's all over the map. It has enough imagination and material for 3 movies, and that becomes a problem since it can't decide which of the 3 movies it wants to be. Anthony Mackie stars as a whistleblower named Jack, who's fired as a corporate vice president, and his bank account is frozen, and then the movie takes a very unexpected turn. That's putting it mildly. His ex-girlfriend Fatima, played by Kerry Washington, is now a lesbian who turns up with a strange business plan.
You see, they would like for you to be their child's daddy.
Fatima, have you lost your damn mind?
They're willing to pay $10,000 each.
Just when we think this movie cannot cover any more bases, Jack gets involved with the mafia. One of the lesbians he impregnated is the daughter of a boss played by John Turturro.
My daughter says you have a lucrative business. Where's your morals? Your self-respect, son?
Look, I was in a tight situation.
I can understand that. Survival makes a person do things they know in their heart is wrong.
Anthony Mackie remains steady at the heart of a plot that includes everything but the kitchen. No, it does include the kitchen.
Yeah, I think it does.
But the whole stud farm business is a bad joke. Which is more unlikely, that Jack could perform 6 times a night, or that 6 lesbians would pay him to, and every one of them would have a noisy orgasm? That's basically a fantasy out of pornography. She Hate Me is preposterous. The critics are likely to hate it. But I give Spike Lee credit for being provocative, outrageous, and daring. In a world of timid and conventional movies, he swings for the fences. I went back and forth on this. I'm going to give it thumbs up because it was never boring. It was always intelligent in its film ideas, even if the plot absolutely fell to pieces.
Roger, this movie was never intelligent from the get-go. I give this movie a big thumbs down. I think it may be the worst movie of the year.
Oh, no, it isn't either.
I mean, first of all, if anybody else made a movie about this black male stud, Spike Lee would be ripping him for trafficking in such obvious stereotypes. Is it supposed to be a parody of stereotypes?
I think so.
It's just insanely outlandish. None of that stuff has any connection to any real-world possibilities that you could ever have.
Were you ever bored during this movie?
I was amazed.
Yes,
I was astonished that I was seeing such garbage on the screen. The acting is horrible. The music is intrusive. And you know, there's this whole plot where he's getting in trouble. This movie knows nothing about the way there would be an investigation into financial misdeeds. The stuff with the mafia is third-rate stereotypes of Italians.
This kind of movie is a real test for a film critic, and it was a real test for me because intellectually I know everything you say is true. You're right. It's preposterous. I know that. Yet at the same time, he keeps doing stuff. I mean, the whole side thing about the Watergate guard, for example. I mean, this movie is really trying to do something in many different ways at the same time, and even though it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. You're right about that.
It fails in a very, very interesting and stimulating way, and I didn't feel as if I resented losing my 2 hours.
I guess on one level I understand what you're saying, because I would say to some people, you got to see this because it's such a train wreck that you won't believe it. But I would say maybe people can wait to rent it and see what I mean. I think it's one of the worst movies of the year.
When I was growing up, between the movies they showed us in school assemblies and the movies we went to see, I saw a lot of movies about white heroes, baseball players, musicians, Glenn Miller, Red Grange. Where are those movies about black heroes?
For the most part, they're yet to be made. But we could go further now. Where are those stories in the history books? Everybody needs heroes.
Do you have a hero that you would like to make a film about someday?
Well, I've done it.
I know, but another one.
I mean, there's a ton of stuff. Toussaint L'Ouverture. Show him kicking Napoleon in the ass. You could still redo the Jackie Robinson story. That would be a great film. No African-American ever has had to go through what Jackie Robinson went through. If Jackie Robinson failed, we're not talking about sports. We'd have been set back 20 years across the board. Politics, entertainment, everything. He had the weight of the entire race, on his shoulders, and probably ended what killed him, with him dying of a heart attack.
One thing that you've done is you've shown middle-class characters on the screen in Jungle Fever and More Better Blues. That's very rare, though. When we think of black cinema in America, we often think of violence and crime and poverty and drugs over and over again.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. The black filmmakers, it is really upon our shoulders to diversify the subject matter. And you really can't go into thinking, well, I'm going to make this film because that's the only type of film they make and that's the only film they're going to fund. And this is not a knock on the films, but Boys in the Hood, Straight Outta Brooklyn, and Juice, we've seen that. And let me reiterate once again, for Matty Rich, Ernest, and John, it's not a comment on the work, but we've seen that, and there's so much more to tell.
Is there anything that continues to make you real mad about the conditions that you make films under?
Yes, it's just the double standards. When Warner Brothers looks at Oliver Stone, at JFK, and Kevin Costner, that is not the same way to look at Denzel Washington, myself, and Malcolm X. Just isn't true.
But they're making your film.
Barely.
Wouldn't they argue that there might be more people interested in JFK than Malcolm X?
Yeah, and I could argue there'd be more people interested in Malcolm X than Nothing But Trouble, which Warner Brothers spent $45 million for and gave Dan Aykroyd. Dan Aykroyd never directed a film in his life, and he got $45 million to do Nothing But Trouble.
They're serving dogs?
No, hot dogs, Dutch country Herefords, prize winners.
Nothing But Trouble was a pretty bad film.
It sucked.
Why has it been that traditionally movies have really shied away from frank sexuality when it comes to African-American people? I mean,
because generally, white American males are intimidated by black sexuality.
But do you think that process still applies to box office and to movie audiences in 1992?
I'm telling you. I think the white male and there's something about the sexuality of black males that bothers them.
You fought for the right to make Malcolm X, and at one point, Norman Jewison was connected to it, and you felt this story should be made by a black filmmaker. Do you believe, however, that in general, blacks and whites can make films about each other?
Yes, I believe that wholeheartedly. I've never said that only black people direct black subject matter and only white directors direct white subject matter. I do feel, however, on specific cases, it's needed. No one can tell me that Francis Ford Coppola being Italian-American not enhance the Godfather trilogy.
Hey, Mikey, why don't you tell that nice girl you love her? I love you with all of my heart.
No one can tell me that Martin Scorsese being Italian-American did not help Mean Streets, Raging Bull, and Goodfellas.
It was Michael's favorite. I was making ziti with the meat gravy, and I'm planning to roast some peppers over the flame.
Because they're Italian-Americans, and the same thing, I think, applies with Malcolm X in this case.
When a film opens that might have a potential for crossover, do you think there's a problem with the white perception that they might not be safe
with the audience that they're going to find when they go to see that film?
Well, that is a problem because this is a perception that's been shaped by the media. The same thing they did with rap music, where they associated violence with rap music. The media's done it with black subject matter. We lost a lot of money on Do the Right Thing because of the alleged riots that were going to happen.
When Malcolm X opens, for example, are people going to be afraid to go on opening night?
I hope not. I picked up the paper yesterday, and Mickey Rourke is blaming me and John Singleton for the riots in L.A.
Have you had a response to that?
He's a redneck cracker who doesn't know what he's talking about. I mean, were we and John responsible for the Watts riots? John wasn't born and I was 7 years old. It makes sense because he hangs around with, you know, Hell's Angels anyway. So that's the type of mentality he has. And he should take a shower and a shave at the same time.
Do you think that anything that happened in L.A. is going to change the movies that we see in the next few years?
Well, hopefully, and make people be more, maybe want to deal with realism a little more and the world that we live in.
What were some of the thoughts that went through your mind while you were watching television during the L.A.?
Well, I was in Los Angeles during the L.A. riots, and we were showing Warner Brothers a film, Malcolm X. It was amazing. While L.A. was burning down, everything Malcolm X was saying was an explanation for what was happening in L.A. at that time, and we're talking 27 years back, and nothing has changed.
Tomorrow you get a new job. You're the head of a major studio. What do you do?
Clean house. I be chopping heads left and right. I get some color in there, some pigmentation.
Do you see any ways that the studios waste money?
Some of the money that these actors are getting is ridiculous. The guy got $3 million for the script, The Basic Instinct.
You won't learn anything I don't want you to know.
Yes, I will. And I'll nail you.